Jaya Radha Madhava Kunjabi Gopi Janavallabha Srivaradha Gopi Janavallabha Srivaradha Yashodanandana Bhajajanandana Yashodanandana Bhajajanandana Yamuna Tira Vanachari Yamuna Tira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Gopi Janavallabha Girivardhari Gopi Janavallabha Girivardhari Yashodanandana Bhajadana Ramidana Yashodanandana Bhajadana Ramidana Yamuna Tira Vanachari Yamuna Tira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Radha Madhava Kunjari Bihari Hare Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare Jaya Radha Damodara Radha Damodara Shri Radhe Radha Damodara Radha Damodara Shri Radhe Jaya Lalita Vishaka Lalita Vishaka Shri Radhe Lalita Vishaka Lalita Vishaka Shri Radhe Jaya Nitai Gaura Sundara Nitai Gaura Sundara Gaura Hari Nitai Gaura Sundara Nitai Gaura Sundara Gaura Hari Prabhupada, 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 Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Jaya Prabhupada, 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 Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Jaya Gurudev, 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 Jaya Gurudev, Jaya Jaya Gurudev, 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 Jaya Gurudev. Haribo, 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 Nitya Gora Haribo, Gora Haribo, Haribo. A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Vishnu Paramahamsa Paramahansa Sutta Sata Shri Srimad Bhagavatam Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur Maharshi Prabhupada Ki Jai. Anantakoti Vaishnava Vrinda Ki Jai. Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur Ki Jai. ISKCON Founder Jai Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Prem se kaho Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shri Vasti Gaura Bhaktivinoda Ki Jai. Shri Shri Radha Krishna Go Gopinath Shama Kun Radha Kun Giri Govardhan Ki Jai. Vrindavan Dham Ki Jai. Mathura Dham Ki Jai. Jagannath Puri Dham Ki Jai. Giri Giri Govardhan Ki Jai. Ganga Mai Manmaya Ki Jai. Tulsi Devi Bhakti Devi Ki Jai. Samaveda Bhakti Vrinda Ki Jai. Gaura Premanandi Hari Hari Bo. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the lotus feet of Sri Guru and Sri Gauranga. Good morning, dear Vaishnavas. Thank you for coming to class. Today we're on text 33, I believe. Yes, 33. Seventh Canto, Chapter 8. And the title of the chapter is Lord Nrsingadev slays the king of demons. Dyaustat satokshita vimana shankula protsarpatashma chapada vidpidita shaila shamutpetur amushya ramhasha tatejasakam kakubho nare jire. Dyaustat satokshita vimana shankula protsarpatashma chapada pidita shaila samudpeturamusha ramhasa tate jasakam kakubho nare jire. Dyaustat satokshita vimana shankula protsarpatashma chapadai padapi pidita shaila samutpeturmusha ramhasa tate jasa kam kakubo nare jire. Please, anyone try.
Dyaustat Shatokshita Vimana Sankula Pratsarpata Shama Chaparabi Pratsarpata Shma Chapadabi Pidita Shaila Samutpetor Amus Yaram Hasab Tatejasa Kam kakubo na vejere.
Yeah, start. Go ahead.
Thank you. Dasya tatsata kashpitava manu sankula prota sarpata shamchapada bipitita shaila samutputur amusharam hasa tate jasakam kakubo narijare.
Yeah, start. Shatok shipita shipta viman a sankula prot sarpata kshma chapada bidata shaila samutpe turamusharang hasa tate jasakang kakubo narejire.
Dios.
Go ahead.
Dios.
All I'm hearing is one word. I don't know if you're continuing with the verse or just saying the one word. Okay, I'll go word for word. Diao, outer space. Tatsata, by his hair. Utkishita, thrown up. Vimana Shankula, filled with airplanes. Protsarpata, slipped out of space. Shma, the planet Earth. Cha, also. Pada abhipidita, distressed due to the heavy weight of the lotus feet of the Lord. Shailaha, the hills and mountains. Samudpetu, sprang up. Amusha, of that one, the Lord. Ramhasha, due to the intolerable force. Tat Tejasa, by his effulgence. Kam, the sky. Kaku Baha, the 10 directions. Na Re Jire, did not shine. Translation by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki. Airplanes were thrown into outer space in the upper planetary system by the hair on the Shringadev's head. Because of the pressure of the Lord's lotus feet, the earth appeared to slip from its position, and all the hills and mountains sprang up due to his intolerable force. Because of the Lord's bodily effulgence, both the sky and all directions diminished in their natural illumination. Purport. That there were airplanes flying in the sky long, long ago can be understood from this verse. Srimad Bhagavatam was spoken 5,000 years ago, and the statements of this verse prove that the symptoms of a very advanced civilization then existed, even in the upper planetary systems, as well as in the lower planetary systems. Modern scientists and philosophers foolishly explain that there was no civilization prior to 3,000 years ago. But the statement of this verse nullifies such whimsical judgments. The Vedic civilization existed millions and millions of years ago. It existed since the creation of this universe, and it included arrangements all over the universe with all the modern amenities and even more. Wow. Om Agina Timirandasya Gina Gina Shalakaya Shakshmo Nitame Tinismai Shri Guru Vedam. Shri Chaitanya Namo Vistam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupakada Mayam Dadanti Swam Padantika. Hey Krishna Kuna Sindhu Dina Bandhu Jagate Gopisha Gopika Kanta Radhakanta Namote. Nama Om Vishnu Krishna Star Bhutale Shimani Bhakti Tila Swami Tinamane. Namaste Krishna Padaya Prabhupada Shritavane Shri Gaura Purna Shakti Bhakti Tirtha Tinamane. Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Pastaya Bhutale Shrimati Bhakti Vedanta Swami Tinamane. Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Vicharane Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paskacha Jasacharane. Vanchakalpatrubhischa Kripasin Vacha Patitanam Pavne Vil Vaishnavi Vil Namo Namaha. Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasti Gaur Bhaktivinoda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, dear devotees. Thank you for coming to the Bhagavatam class. Uh, by regular attendance, we can destroy all that is troublesome to the heart. The verse again is Jyostat Sotot Chita Vimana Shankula Protsarpata Shma Chapada Bipidita Shaila Samudpe Turamusha Ramhasha Tate Jasa Kam Kakubo Narejive. Airplanes were thrown into outer space in the upper planetary system by the hair on the Shringadeva's head. Because of the pressure of the Lord's lotus feet, the earth appeared to slip from its position, and all the hills and mountains sprang up due to his intolerable force. Because of the Lord's bodily effulgence, both the sky and all directions diminished in their natural illumination. Wow, what a description. And yesterday's verse also gave more description of the the impact that Lord Nrsimhadev was having on the entire cosmos, it seems. And I'll read that verse again. The hair on Nrsimhadev's head shook the clouds and scattered them here and there. His glaring eyes stole the effulgence of the luminaries in the sky, and his breathing agitated the seas and oceans. Because of his roaring, all the elephants in the world began to cry in fear. So it seems like uh, this, the verses are giving just kind of like a little small description of what's happening on a cosmic level, due to Lord Nrsimha's power, awesome power, and disrupting the entire planetary systems, and you know, uh, all living entities seem to be affected. The elephants are crying. You know, it's like all life, which is all connected to Krishna, because all life is emanating from him. Everything is emanating from him. It seems like because of his intensity of emotions and the desire to protect his devotee, that this everything is being impacted and somewhat feeling that intensity. You um, so even just the hairs on his body, which are just as potent as any, his fists or his claws, you know, it's spreading the clouds, and the airplanes are flying back into the upper planetary systems. I mean, which is quite far, out into outer space and upper planetary systems. um, and how the pressure of the Lord's lotus feet is having such an impact on the earth. His presence is being felt so heavily that the mountains and hills are just popping up, you know. And I just imagine like if you had a water balloon and you squeezed it, you know how other parts of the water balloon are popping up, you know, because of the pressure. Um, and if you can imagine, I mean, if we were there at that moment, somewhere on the earth, all of a sudden mountains and the hills are just exploding out from the earth, huge mountains, and the amount of commotion that would have caused, just the noise level, and the the devastation, rocks, boulders, and just like the sound itself, from all of that, you know. We get a little taste of that, like with earthquakes and tornadoes and things like that, but this was just like um, just fearsome. Um, and so in this verse, something else that's being discussed is vimanas, and in the word to word is described that vimana means airplane, and so it's translated by Prabhupada that airplanes were thrown into outer space and the upper planetary system. Um, and so Prabhupada says that, there were airplanes flying in the sky long, long ago and can be understood from this verse. And so, in that modern scientists and philosophers, they think that civilization over time has made advancement, you know. But from the Vedic cosmology, and the understanding is that it's actually the opposite. That in Satya Yuga, which the period of time of Satya Yuga is 1.7 million years. Treta Yuga is approximately 1.2 and a half years, 1.2 and a half millions of years. And Dwapara Yuga is like 8.5 million years, 0.8.5 million years. And Kali Yuga, which we're 5,000 years into, uh, is a total of 432,000 years. Um, so, and as the time goes on, uh, civilization degrades, gradually. Like it's explained that for each yuga, you know, there's a 25% drop, you know. Um, and so this was actually taking place in the Satya Yuga, so it was at least over 2 million years ago. Um, and so there was a different civilization. This was normal. There was interplanetary travel. You know, there was a much higher understanding. The civilization was just the topmost in Satya Yuga. Um, and so it was a different type of existence than what we know of today. Um, so the airplanes that were being just scattered throughout the upper planetary systems were the demigods present during this pastime of the Sringadev. Um, they were there and um, watching the events and with bated breath and just, cheering on uh, Prahlad and Nrsimhadev. Um, and since Kali Yuga is advancing rapidly, not making advancement in civilization, but there's more effort to play God in so many ways, or to deny God in various ways. Now we have attempts to control the weather, through geoengineering, and we have um, atheistic philosophies and theories being taught in schools from a young age. We learn about evolution and so on, Darwinistic theories, and also that the propagation of sense gratification as the goal of life, is just permeated everywhere. I mean, uh, billboards, TVs, uh, the internet, so on. Um, Controlling populations. This is another way of playing God. AI, artificial intelligence, trying to actually capture all knowledge and be able to access it at any time, but also manipulate it so that there's information in it that is desired or not desired. Um, so uh, that's another way of denying the existence or contact with higher beings. So another topic. Well, just a quick note is that just yesterday, I'm sure you all know that Artemis 2 blasted off, the rocket to supposedly circumambulate the moon. So they're on it, and I think there's like 3 or 4 astronauts on there, and uh, it's like a 10-day journey. So we'll see what happens. but but the vehicles, the airplanes in the Satya Yuga and other planets, it's just a whole different nature. They didn't need fossil fuels and things like that to uh, what do you call it? To move their planes. They had the abilities to. They did have some that were that were controlled mechanically, but they also had airplanes that were controlled just by the mind. Uh, but there's also uh, being higher beings, and the like the charanas and I think vidyadharas, that it's just natural for them to be able to fly just like birds. You know, it's just a common thing. Siddha Loka, that all the residents have all the mystic powers, and they can fly from planet to planet, you know, at will, uh, the speed of mind. So, totally different existence. And as we know, there are um, there have been experiences and reports, especially since the world wars, of UFOs and alien abductions or interactions with extraterrestrials and so on. And one Prabhupada disciple, Sadhuputta, wrote a book called Alien Identities, and he explores this in his book. And the book is like almost 500 pages. And so he examines all of the reports, uh, and he compares the Vedic cosmology and understanding of higher beings and space travel and so on. And unfortunately, he passed away in 2008. Um, he was found at the bottom of his pool in Alatra, which is unfortunate because he's doing some great work. Um, but in some of his work, he describes. I mean, he covers so much information, a lot of different reports and experiences that people had. Uh, and I think it was like in 19 early 1950s, there was one case that uh, they have the recordings, the the pilots speaking and sharing what's actually happening in real time, when they were observing a UFO that looked like it was just following at a certain distance, and it just kept whenever they would move, it would just like stay within that certain distance. And then when they turned their guns, because they were going to attack it, when they turned their guns towards it, um, all of a sudden, the frequencies got jammed, and they couldn't um, identify where they couldn't like you know aim their guns properly, and they lost communication with their base. And then when they switched frequencies to open up the communication again, they would initially have communication again through a new frequency, but then it was disrupted again, and so on. So there were a lot of different situations that would happen, but uh, of course, he also talks about how those things are suppressed. You know, that information and knowledge is suppressed and kind of downplayed and hidden because, and Sariputta Prabhu spoke about this in his book, that it's basically a threat to the societal stability and worldview, um, because the presence of advanced aliens or non-human intelligence, it just challenges the fundamental materialistic worldview in modern science, religion, the political institutions. It challenges all of that. Um, so anything that disrupts the established order is not valued. And of course, there's military and security implications too, because uh, they want to they want to have the highest technology, but also they're aware that they don't have the highest technology, um, and the government's fear of losing control and also um, concerned about the ability to defend against or understand these technologies. So, there's always this cover up with this type of information. And another point is that Prabhupada makes the point in the Bhagavatam that there's 400,000 different types of human forms throughout the universe. So they have to exist somewhere. And he explains that there's life on all planets, and there's millions and trillions of planets in every single universe, and there's millions and trillions unlimited universes, and every single planet has life. And he's explaining that the variation of the types of bodies, when we talk about the elements, earth, water, fire, air, ether, it's different combinations of those elements in the different types of bodies. And so, Prabhupada also speaks about, the whole, the has man ever actually gone to the moon? And Srila Prabhupada said, he said that, the moon is like the proprietor of vegetation, you know, because of the moon, vegetation grows. So how can there not be vegetation growing on the moon itself? um, and he says in the purport to Bhagavatam 1:5-18, he says, some are trying to reach the moon or other planets by some mechanical arrangement, but it is not to happen. By the law of the Supreme, different places are meant for different grades of living beings, according to the work they have performed. So he has said that he has said that the moon, Venus, and the sun are inaccessible to uh, mankind, humankind on Earth, because they're higher planets and they can't be attained only by they can only be attained by actually coming to the mode of goodness, he says. And but of course, uh, devotees are not aspiring for heavenly planets theoretically. In actuality, we may actually be wanting heavenly pleasures and so on, but our ultimate goal is to love Krishna. Um, and so I'm going to open it up soon because I want to have time for any comments or questions. But there's some revelations in the pastimes of Prabhupada show some interactions with higher beings, including Krishna. Um, one time in an LA, in a kirtan in Los Angeles, Prabhupada was smiling and laughing during the kirtan, and afterwards the devotees asked him, why was he laughing? And he said, because a Narada Muni showed up in the kirtan. And he said, well, they asked, well, what was he doing? And he said he was laughing when he saw, because the Malechas and Chandalas were dancing, talking about the devotees. Um, also, um, I think they're in, I'm not sure if this is the Soho Temple or the temple in London, that Prabhupada had the devotees establish an altar, a Vyasasan on the altar, a seat, a small seat for Narada Muni, because he said that occasionally he visits, and it's the etiquette to give great personalities a nice seat. So that seat is there. And there was a past time where Prabhupada, he shared that every morning when he sits to write his books, Krishna comes personally and dictates to him what to write. So he was saying that he reads his books every day because he himself learns from them because Krishna is the actual author. And he said, every time I read them, I learn something. And also there was this pastime with Bhavananda Prabhu, um, where Prabhupada said, I have so many palaces all over the world that I can stay in. Practically speaking, there's no difference between the Goswamis and me in terms of our lifestyle. They stayed under a different tree every night. I stay in a different palace every night. They wrote, I write. Originally, I did not want to come here. He said, Krishna asked, I want you to write these books. Come down and write those books. Prabhupada said to Krishna, but I don't want to go to the material world. Krishna said, don't worry. I'll take care of everything. You write those books. And Bhavananda said that that was the first and only time that he's ever heard of or read where Prabhupada actually spoke about Krishna speaking to him and how he didn't want to come. So Prabhupada is revealing where he's actually coming from, and his actual interaction with Krishna in that dialogue. Uh, so I think I'm gonna stop there and see if there's any comments or questions. I'll read the verse again. Airplanes were thrown into outer space and the upper planetary system by the hair on the Shringadeva's head. Because of the pressure of the Lord's lotus feet, the earth appeared to slip from its position, and all the hills and mountains sprang up due to his intolerable force. Because of the Lord's bodily effulgence, both the sky and all directions diminished in their natural illumination. Okay, we have a scientist in the class here that wants to ask a question or comment. Okay, do you want to take the mic now? Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, I was thinking because of it's a very apropos verse because of the news yesterday about Artemis. I was thinking that it's, really show whether we believe Bhagavatam or not. Because, when Prabhupada was here and he was talking about the moon landing, and people actually left the movement because he was uh, saying that the moon landing didn't happen. And he said, they believe 10-cent newspapers, but don't believe Bhagavatam, right? And, it's easy to kind of think that when it's something that happened, in the 60s or 70s, the moon landing occurred. And, here in 2026, they think, oh, yeah, it's, a historical event and they faked it and things like that. But now, if we are to keep with the Bhagavatam, uh, then we have to say also somehow or other, they faked it or something this time, right? Of course, you could say they aren't actually landing on the moon, so there's some subtlety there. One might be able to make that argument. I haven't thought through all the implications one way or the other. Uh, but still, it comes to the point, do we believe Bhagavatam or not? right? And if we look kind of objectively, there's a lot more. There's a lot of things actually in the Bhagavatam and the Krishna conscious philosophy in general that seem kind of absurd in a certain way, or like absurd from the viewpoint of like modern materialistic society, right? We're told that, this piece of metal from the external viewpoint standing on the altar is actually the Supreme Personality of Godhead, right? Which, if you think about it, is a much larger claim than we didn't go to the moon, right? So if we aren't willing to believe based on the Bhagavatam that we aren't going to the moon, it has the potential actually to make us doubt all of the other things in Bhagavatam, right? Including like, well, if we actually are going to the moon, even though, Prabhupada and Bhagavatam says that we can't, maybe, this past time didn't really happen, right? Oh, it's hard to explain why, Ram banished Sita. So maybe that didn't actually happen, you know, or, attempted disrobing of Draupadi, or, this or that, right? And then, well, it's hard to explain to newcomers how, the deity is actually Krishna, right? So maybe it's a representation of Krishna, right? So it actually, seems like, oh, maybe we don't, you know, maybe we kind of acquiesce on the moon landing for preaching or something like that. But it can actually lead to actually a total. So like once you get to the mentality of I'm going to edit the Bhagavatam, then there's no end to actually what you're editing, right? So there's just some thoughts that I had on the importance of denying the moon landings and uh, actually trusting Bhagavatam over uh, NASA and the U.S. government.
Yeah, nice points. I remember reading something about Prabhupada, saying the understanding that we have because of the framework is different in Vedic cosmos. There's things that because we don't have that kind of
Hmm.
cosmological background, it could actually appear like, how could this even happen?
Yeah.
But it's just that we don't actually understand it.
Yeah. So actually, I decided to investigate, this claim before. One of Prabhupada's most shocking cosmological claims that the moon is farther away from Earth than the sun, right? And I was thinking, like, what actually evidence do we have that the moon is closer than the sun? The distance to these things, uh, without the Apollo missions, right? Because if we think those didn't happen, then how actually do we know the distance to the moon, right? And it basically have to do with parallax, right? You measure, like, you look at it in two different places, and you know the distance between those, and then you can kind of triangulate it. But that is based on the assumptions that things operate in the heavenly planets. Even light or gravity operates in the heavenly planets like it does on Earth, right? Which is an assumption, right? It's an assumption that everything in the universe operates like it does on Earth, right? If you start with a different assumption, you can get to different conclusions, right? And really, it is an assumption. It's an axiom that what is happening here on Earth, the laws of physics that are here, are the same that they are on other planets. The science has to modern science has to assume that to say things about the universe. But, logically speaking, you can start with different assumptions, right? And then you can interpret the evidence through those assumptions rather than the other one. And who's to say that the assumptions that everything is the same everywhere is any more uh, valid than the assumption that it works differently, right? I can live here, I can't live in outer space, right? So there's some difference, right? The question is does that difference go all the way to the laws of physics?
Yeah, it's interesting. When you explore there's many different levels to explore these topics. Just like yogis have the power
Hmm.
to create airplanes or like a mothership, with,
Yeah.
like Carter Berry.
Hmm.
I mean, demigods doing what he was able, and they travel all over the universe. It said universes.
Yeah.
So left this version with that same person and travel all over. And so, Shaw, he also has like invisible airplane,
Hmm.
get attacked. So of course Krishna killed him. Um, so there was technology that was uh, beyond our understanding, you know, and these beings have mystic powers just naturally. But some also, Prabhupada also was making this comment that the Vedic cosmology is so strong, like
We can't hear you well anymore.
You have to.
okay. Can you hear me? Okay.
That's better. Thank you.
All right.
Yeah, we missed what you said.
Hare Krishna. So I was saying that there's so many mystic powers that were just like natural. I was mentioning the Charanas and the Vidyadharas, you know, that the whole planet, and the Siddhaloka, you know, they're all demigods and they all have mystic powers, all 8 mystic cities. And they can fly from planet to planet and so on. So it's a whole different conception of life. I mean, way of life, and that like was it Cardamom Muni, who created through his yogic power an entire city, traveling city that could travel all over the universe, and it had people and vegetation, everything just like on the earth, just and traveling all over. Um, but the point is that all these things seem amazing and wonderful and everything, but um, for a devotee, um, just being able to offer a little flower to Krishna and please Krishna is more powerful than all of those mystic powers because one is engaged in their constitutional activity um, by serving Krishna. Looks like we have a hand up. Please unmute yourself and make your comment.
Hi, well, Dad, thank you so much for your wonderful class. I had one thought I was thinking about when you were mentioning about um UFOs and stuff. I was just thinking about Katir's Mirage because in his Spiritual Warrior book, one, he talks about that. And he also talks about how, like, when he used to do radio programs, like years and years in the past, when he would first bring up, he would bring up about UFOs, people would be like, yeah, I like what you said, Swami, but why did you bring that up? But then he said over time, as people became more open, then they were more able to like hear that, and they weren't as like caught off guard when he would bring it up. And I also was thinking about how he really knew how to, depending what those were interested in, he would bring things that they were interested in. So like in the early days in the Institute, how he had like the cassette tapes, and there were people that were joining, that were coming around him, that were interested in that. So he had those like UFOs, extraterrestrials, and so like he was so expert at being able to like see what they, like connect with souls and where they were at and what they wanted to hear about. And, he would have the different cassettes for sale based on like different topics to help like open their conscience was already open to that. So then he would like share it with them. So I just wanted to share that because I was thinking about him in terms of this topic, because I know he's spoken a lot about it, about these kind of things. Thank you so much.
Thank you for that reminder. And also in his Satyaraj's book, Black Lotus, about Bhakti Tirtha Maharaj, his life, there was an experience he had as as a child. I think it was his cousin that actually had was an extraterrestrial entered his body, his cousin's body, and they for a couple of days. And Bhakti Tirtha Maharaj was describing some of that experience that he had with him. And I don't remember all the details, so I'm not going to share anymore about it. But yeah, thank you for that reminder, Devaki. Um, any other comments or questions? We have a couple more minutes. Um, Mother Leela Kishori, Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, good morning. Thank you for this wonderful class and the discussion that it has generated after. I loved Kalaswaru's comments about we either accept, and that's how I look at it, we accept this is true or we don't. And you can't, it's sort of like in for a penny, in for a pound. You can't pick and choose what you want to accept. It's like you take the whole package or you kind of don't take any of it. And I was thinking how bhakti, we describe it as a creeper, like starting as a seed, and growing if you nurture it. And when you look at an acorn, you don't actually see an oak, but all the elements are there, right? So if I believe that I am truly a spirit soul, and Krishna says to Arjuna in Bhagavad Gita, you don't remember all the lives you've been through. I do. I remember all of it, but you don't. Then wouldn't it be plausible that when an age is over, we're not going to remember as humans what happened in that age? We're just not. It's, when everything is absorbed and comes, how would you remember that there were airplanes or how would you know? And then I think about evolution is just common sense that if things are evolving and changing and there's actually natural selection and survival of the fittest, then subtly over time, we should have changed to be able to breathe smog. And we should have changed to have our own SPF, in our skins because we're destroying, but that's not happening, is it? So, and even that there's life on the planet that we don't know about. Every time you turn around, they go, oh, we went further down toward the bottom and we found this thing that nobody knew existed. And it's like, you don't think there might be intelligent life there? Even on this planet, we don't know all of the things that are happening. So we're going to assume that we know what's happening out in space. And sometimes it's just common sense, but common sense just doesn't seem to be that common. So I think that some of it is exactly what my god brother said, that when you accept this and when you seek, and even in the Bible, if you're talking to Christians or if you're talking to Muslims, even in the Quran, there are jinn, there are angels, there were giants on the earth. There were people like Enoch who says just walked with God and walked off the planet. He didn't have to die. And it's like Ezekiel saw a spaceship. If you read that and you can believe that, then it's not such a stretch when someone offers you Bhagavad Gita or Srimad Bhagavatam. But then that's what Prabhupada said, encourage people, at least read your own book, because that in itself will open your mind to stretch a little bit further. So I think that sometimes it's just that we've become, like I said, what do you say? You believe dime store papers? We've become so narrow in this age and so ignorant that it's just hard for people even to see the wisdom in the path that's been given to them, much less to stretch, and that we have to have kindness and compassion and bring people along slowly. The Apostle Paul said, you don't give a 3-course meal to a baby because all they can take is mother's milk. So you give people what they can digest. And then when they're able to digest that, you offer a little bit more. So thank you for this class, because it opened up my heart to looking at it that way. Hare Krishna.
Thank you for sharing. Um, the last point I was thinking, something Hari Chakra Prabhu shares often, is that um, uh, we can appreciate where anyone is. Just like, let's give an example before about it. A child can understand a certain level of mathematics, but then when you take it to a higher level of mathematics, beyond multiplication, division, addition, and subtraction, and you get into negative numbers. I mean, negative number, that's impossible, but, it's just the higher information. But you can affirm what they actually do know, and then build from there, and then you can explain and help gradually, help, you know. But if you just reject, oh, that you just don't understand, there is this, and just smash what they actually do know, then you're not building that connection of friendship that our Chakra Prabhu was saying, where there's a commonality there, and then you can actually gradually open up more communication and connection. Any other comments? It's after 8.
I appreciate all the research that went into this and the rich discussion. Thank you for making such a big effort.
Oh, thank you. There's so much more information I could be sharing. But what to do? Only a certain amount of time, and my capacity is limited. Okay, so what's it look like, Pajaris? Okay, we'll end here. Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam ki, Srila Prabhupada ki.
Jai.
Jai.
Gaur Bhakta Vrinda ki.
Ki jai.
Jai.
Vachikapati Vishya Kripasinabhya
Thank you.
Vichadapati
Thank you, everyone, for your contributions.
Jai. Thank you, everyone, for your contributions.